In a small village surrounded by dense forests, there was a legend about an ancient palace that disappeared hundreds of years ago. It was said that this palace belonged to an evil wizard who lived in the Middle Ages, and that it suddenly disappeared without a trace. But the legend also said that the palace reappeared every 100 years on the night of the full moon and disappeared again with the sunrise. On the night of the full moon, a group of adventurous friends decided to explore the forest to find this palace. There were 5 of them: Ahmed, who was always the brave one and the leader of the group; Lila, who loved legends and strange stories; Khalid, who was skeptical and did not believe in ghosts; Sarah, who was afraid but her curiosity was greater than her fear; and finally Yusef, who carried his camera everywhere to photograph everything strange. They started their journey at midnight, carrying flashlights and some supplies. The forest was dark and quiet, except for the sounds of nocturnal animals that added to the horror of the situation. After hours of walking, a thick fog began to surround them, and suddenly the palace appeared in front of them. The palace was huge and imposing, built of black stone that seemed to absorb the light. The wooden doors were closed, but they slowly opened as they approached, as if welcoming them. Inside the palace, the walls were covered with ancient paintings of faces that seemed to follow them with their gaze. The air was cold and damp, and the smell of mold was everywhere. They began to explore the rooms, and everything seemed to have stopped in time. Old furniture, dusty books, and wall clocks that stopped at midnight. But the most terrifying thing was the faint sound they began to hear from afar. It was a voice that resembled whispers, but the words could not be understood. In one of the rooms, they found an ancient manuscript that talked about the sorcerer who built the palace. The manuscript said that the sorcerer was practicing magic rituals to steal people's souls and keep them locked inside the palace forever. It also mentioned that the palace disappears because it is in another world and only appears when the sorcerer wants to attract new victims. Suddenly, the doors started to close by themselves, and they heard evil laughter echoing throughout the palace. They tried to escape, but the corridors kept changing, as if the palace itself was trying to keep them inside. The pictures on the walls started to move, and the eyes in the paintings followed them wherever they went. After hours of terror, they found themselves in a large room with a huge mirror. When Ahmed looked in the mirror, he saw a reflection of someone else instead of himself. The magician's face was staring at him from the mirror, and he started to slowly emerge from it. They tried to escape, but the magician grabbed Khalid and dragged him into the mirror, where he disappeared without a trace. The rest started screaming and running, but the palace was turning into a maze. Sarah suddenly disappeared when a mysterious shadow touched her, and Layla found herself trapped in a room that started to fill with water. Ahmed and Yusef were the last ones, and they tried to find a way out, but the magician appeared in front of them again. With the sunrise, the palace disappeared again, and only Yusef remained, who found himself alone in the forest with his camera. When he turned on the camera, he found terrifying shots: Khalid being dragged into the mirror, Sarah disappearing into the darkness, and Lila drowning in the locked room. But the most terrifying was the last shot, in which Ahmed appeared looking into the camera before disappearing, and the magician's face appeared behind him smiling. Yusef returned to the village, but he couldn't sleep since that day. He always heard whispers at night, as if the palace was still haunting him. And no one dared to go to that forest again. This story reminds us that some secrets should remain buried, and that curiosity can sometimes be deadly.